Human Chair by Edogawa Rampo. The parcel arrived during the season's first true autumn storm, its brown paper wrapping darkened by rain and clinging to the angular shape within like a second skin. Yoshiko, whose psychological novels had made her the most celebrated female author of the Taisho era, nearly handed it to her maid unopened, mistaking it for another manuscript from one of her many imitators. But the seal gave her pause. Not the usual vermilion wax, but something organic-looking, translucent and yellowish, like the residue left when a bandage is peeled from an old wound. The handwriting sprawled across the surface in erratic strokes, the ink pooling grotesquely in places where the writer's hand had evidently trembled. The paper inside had an unusual weight and texture, thick as vellum, but with a faint graininess that made Yoshiko think of aged skin. It smelled of camphor and something more intimate, the musky scent of a body that had been confined too long in tight spaces. The writing began with deceptively elegant penmanship. "My dearest Madame Yoshiko, what you hold is not a letter, but an anatomy of obsession. Not correspondence from an admirer, but a confession from one who has existed within your daily life more completely than any lover could claim. For 3 months, 14 days, and approximately 7 hours, I have been the silent witness to your creative process, your private sorrows, your most unguarded moments. By profession, I am a craftsman of chairs. By nature, I am a scholar of human intimacy in its most concentrated form." Yoshiko's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the pages. Though the study's fireplace crackled merrily, she felt an inexplicable chill creep up her spine. The new reading chair from that peculiar Ginza workshop, the one with the unusually thick padding, emitted a faint sigh as she shifted her weight. "They called me a genius once. My chairs grace the finest homes in Tokyo, though never bearing my name. My face was not made for polite society. From my earliest memory, I elicited screams rather than smiles. Nurses would cross themselves when tending me as an infant. Schoolmates threw salt to ward me off. By 12, I understood my only path to human connection lay in becoming invisible, not just unseen, but physically incorporated into the objects others cherished." The ink darkened noticeably here, as if the writer had paused to reload his pen with some thicker, more viscous fluid. The first time was January 17, 1916. A Louis XV armchair commissioned for the French ambassador's wife. Drunk on loneliness and inferior brandy, the only kind my appearance allowed me to purchase, I had stitched a cavity between the padding and the frame, just large enough to fold myself into, like a spider in its web. When Madame sat down to pen her letters that evening, the heat of her body permeating the leather was more intoxicating than any liquor. For 5 glorious hours, I cradled her weight, memorized the rhythm of her breathing, learned the particular sigh she made when reading her lover's letters. When she absent-mindedly scratched her thigh through her silk dress, the vibration traveled through the entire structure of my being. I was ruined for any other intimacy. Yoshiko became acutely aware of how perfectly her current chair conformed to her body, how the armrests seemed to anticipate the angle of her elbows, how the back support aligned with her spine, as if grown to her specifications. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows like impatient fingers. Soon, I was engineering hiding places in all my commissions. The Supreme Court Justice, who signed execution orders, while perched upon my ribs, I still have the pen he dropped between the cushions. The opera diva whose sweat perfumed my stuffing during her high C. I can replicate the scent perfectly. Would you like me to demonstrate? But you were different from the moment your housekeeper placed the order. A writer's chair, the specifications read, must accommodate long hours of creative work, wide enough to tuck one's legs beneath, with arms that support but don't constrain. I wept when I read those words. Here at last was a subject worthy of my devotion. I spent 53 days perfecting your chair. The frame was constructed from rare Taiwanese cypress, chosen for its ability to muffle sound. The leather, imported specially from Argentina, was treated with a solution of my own devising to make it receptive to body heat. I lined the interior with silk pockets for rice balls and a water flask that could be refilled during your nightly baths. The air holes were disguised as decorative stitching in the shape of your initials. As for more private needs, let's just say I developed a remarkably efficient system using absorbent moss and copper tubing. Yoshiko's breath caught. She remembered the chair's delivery, how the craftsman's assistants had refused to meet her eyes, how the leather had emitted a strange, almost biological warmth in those first weeks, as if the chair were acclimating to her. Her cat, usually so docile, had hissed at it uncontrollably until banished from the study. For 101 days, I lived within your rhythms like a second heartbeat, learned how you hum off-key when wrestling with dialogue. Always G minor, interesting choice. The way your left foot twitches during love scenes. 3 rapid pulses when the prose flows, slower when struggling. That stormy night you wept over your dying protagonist. Your tears seeped through the seams like blessed rain, and I drank them greedily. They tasted of ink and weak jasmine tea, and something uniquely Yoshiko. I could pick your tears out from 100 others. The letter's edges were slightly frayed, Yoshiko noticed, not from mailing, but from constant handling. Certain passages bore circular stains where fingertips had repeatedly touched the same words, wearing through the paper in places. A reddish-brown smudge near the margin made her think uncomfortably of bloodied fingers. When you began complaining of disturbing noises last week, when your maid mentioned the chair seemed to shift on its own during your afternoon naps, I knew our idyll must end. The craftsman received your returned chair yesterday, as I knew he would. He'll find it empty, of course. The replacement now gracing your study? A hollow shell, a mere echo of my craftsmanship. I've relocated to more dynamic quarters. Her eyes flew to the postmark. The letter had been mailed before she'd sent the chair back. A drop of cold sweat traced the length of Yoshiko's spine as she realized. He'd known she would return it before she'd even made the decision. The final paragraph wasn't written in ink, but carved into the paper with what must have been a razor or surgical scalpel. Check your wardrobe tonight, Yoshiko. Count your kimonos. If you find one extra, well, you'll know I've taken up residence in your most private spaces. I particularly admire the peach silk one with the crane embroidery. It holds your scent beautifully. Beneath this, added in different ink, fresher, darker. Do air out your writing desk occasionally. The smell of my anticipation must be unbearable by now. Also, your maid's key fits the liquor cabinet too easily. You might want to address that. Yoshiko sat perfectly still. the letter trembling slightly in her hands. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked. Not the usual settling of an old structure, but the deliberate compression of wood under weight. Outside, the autumn rain continued its relentless patter against the windows, each drop sounding unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. The chair, the new one, the supposedly empty one, let out a soft exhalation as she rose unsteadily to her feet. The letter slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor like a wounded bird. In that moment, Yoshiko understood with terrible clarity that true horror isn't realizing you're being watched. It's realizing the watching may never stop, and worse, that part of you has come to depend on it. The most disturbing thought of all whispered through her mind, what if I start missing the weight of his gaze? This chilling tale was penned by Edogawa Ranpo, 1894-1965. Ranpo's stories like The Human Chair continue to influence modern horror creators worldwide, from Junji Ito to Black Mirror writers. If you enjoyed this descent into obsession, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell icon. We're brewing more stories, from forgotten Meiji-era classics to cutting-edge Japanese horror, delivered straight to your ears every full moon. Hope to see you soon.